Under the dim lantern glow outside Montrose Manor, Rosamund Hale gathered her fraying courage like a shawl too thin for the night. The gala had spilled onto the steps in a glitter of jewels and murmurs, every guest gilded with confidence that fate had denied her. She had come only because her aunt insisted, one must be seen even in misfortune. Yet the moment Rosamund stepped into the wash of carriage lights, the whispers started. A pair of young ladies tittered behind their gloved hands, remarking on the bankrupt girl who dared return to society. The words struck like sleet, cold and unrelenting, chasing her deeper into the rain-swept night. A sudden downpour forced Rosamund to move quickly, though her steps were hindered by the weight of humiliation gathering in her chest. She clutched her modest cloak against the storm, searching desperately for her hired carriage. Lanterns blurred in the rain. Servants ran back and forth, attempting to maintain order among horses growing restless from the thunder rolling over London. In the chaos, Rosamund approached what she believed was her carriage, a polished black conveyance with brass lanterns and a footman holding the door open. She offered only a timid nod before climbing inside, grateful for the refuge. The warm interior air was fragrant with lavender sachets and hints of expensive upholstery. Rosamund froze as she realized she was not alone. Across from her sat a woman cloaked in widow's black, her silver hair arranged with elegant precision beneath a dark veil. Her posture was impeccable, her gloved hands resting lightly atop an ivory-handled cane. Rosamund felt instantly like a trespasser in a sacred chamber. Before she could speak, the woman lifted her chin, examining Rosamund with a gaze that saw far too much. "My dear," she said coolly, "you are not the passenger I expected." Rosamund's breath fled. She stammered an apology, reaching for the handle to leave, but thunder cracked hard above them, startling the horses. The carriage lurched forward. The footman closed the door with finality, and the wheels rolled into motion before Rosamund could escape. Rain hammered the roof like impatient fists. Inside the gentle rocking of the carriage, Rosamund pressed her hands together to keep them from trembling. The woman regarded her not with irritation, but with a sharp curiosity that unsettled more than anger would have. "Name," the woman instructed, not unkindly, yet allowing no room for refusal. "Rosamund Hale," she whispered. Recognition flickered in the woman's eyes, quickly followed by a thoughtful silence. "Hale? Yes, the family that suffered those unfortunate financial calamities. A fall from grace is rarely survived with dignity, but you seem to have managed." Rosamund wished the darkness would swallow her whole. She nodded, unsure whether agreement or denial would worsen her position. The woman's gaze softened, though her expression remained austere. "I am Lady Agatha Wessex," she said. The name struck with the weight of an iron gate closing. The Wessex family was among the oldest and most influential in the kingdom, and Rosamund had stumbled directly into their private domain. Outside, silhouettes of grand houses passed through the rain-streaked window as London dimmed into quieter streets. Rosamund attempted again to apologize, but Lady Agatha lifted a hand. "Do not trouble yourself with explanations. I am more interested in what brought you to step into any carriage in such haste. Were you fleeing something? Someone?" Rosamund hesitated. "Only unkindness, my lady." Lady Agatha let the words settle between them like falling ash. "The world is fond of cruelty toward those who cannot defend themselves," she replied. "It is a sport and I have watched it far too long." The carriage slowed as they entered a gated courtyard lined with gas lamps glowing like watchful eyes. The carriage stopped before an imposing townhouse of white stone and wrought iron balconies. Servants appeared instantly, umbrellas unfurling in the rain. Rosamund's panic returned. "My lady, please, I beg your pardon, I truly do not belong here." Lady Agatha stepped down first, her figure regal even in the storm. She turned back to Rosamund with an expression both calculated and unexpectedly tender. "My son," she said, "is in need of a wife. The lineage demands it, the estate requires it, and I have long feared he would choose no one at all." Rosamund felt her heart lurch. The words were so sudden she almost believed she misheard them. Lady Agatha continued, her voice steady as the storm raged. "You entered my carriage by mistake. Or perhaps you did not. Fate is a mischievous architect." Rosamund shook her head, rain mingling with the tears that threatened to fall. "My lady, I cannot. Your son is a duke and I—" Lady Agatha touched her cane lightly to the stones. "You are a woman whom society has treated unfairly. That, Miss Hale, is precisely the sort of character I wish beside my son." Servants glanced at them with subtle interest, aware that something significant stirred beneath the thunder. The front doors of the townhouse opened, casting warm golden light across the courtyard. Rosamund stood on the threshold of a world she had no claim to, its grandeur overwhelming, its possibilities terrifying. Lady Agatha observed her with a quiet satisfaction, as though a puzzle piece had clicked neatly into place. "Come inside," she commanded gently. "There are matters to consider, and you cannot return to Montrose Manor alone in this storm. It would only give the gossips another tale to twist." Rosamund knew she was right. If she refused, the humiliation would become legend. If she entered, she stepped into uncertainty far greater. Rosamund took a single step forward, her shoes slick with rain, her pulse a trembling drum in her ears. Behind her, the carriage door remained open like a mouth waiting to swallow someone else's fate. Lady Agatha watched her with a sharp, discerning eye, and for a fleeting moment Rosamund sensed the older woman was not merely plotting, but hoping for something long denied. The storm bellowed overhead as Rosamund crossed the final distance toward the waiting threshold. She paused at the doorway, her hand upon the carved oak frame, breath tight with fear and unspoken longing. Then she stepped inside. The morning after the storm, Rosamund woke beneath a canopy of embroidered silk, disoriented by the soft rustle of servants preparing the hearth. The chamber was elegant but unfamiliar, paneled walls lined with portraits, a marble fireplace crowned with carved roses, and a window overlooking the misted gardens of Wessex House. She rose slowly, feeling like an intruder in someone else's dream. A maid entered with a curtsy, informing her that Lady Agatha wished to see her in the breakfast salon. Rosamund felt a tremor of dread, yet she followed the maid down the grand staircase where polished banisters gleamed like dark rivers in the morning light. Lady Agatha sat at the head of a modestly laid table, sipping her tea with the serene composure of a monarch reviewing her kingdom. She motioned for Rosamund to sit. "I trust you slept well," she said. Rosamund answered quietly, unsure how to navigate the strange newness of her circumstances. Lady Agatha's gaze softened just enough to suggest approval. "My son returned late," she continued. "He is a man of many obligations, and I expect you will find him formidable." Rosamund's pulse quickened at the mention of the Duke. She had glimpsed him only in newspapers and distant conversations, an enigmatic figure known for his disciplined restraint and rare appearances. The door opened, and in stepped Alastair Hawthorne Wessex, Duke of Merivale, his presence filling the room with the quiet force of a gathering storm. He removed his gloves slowly, revealing strong hands marked by faint scars. His dark hair was still damp from the morning fog, and his eyes, cool, deliberate, found Rosamund at once. She rose instinctively, offering a shy curtsy. He inclined his head, studying her with a gaze that did not judge but weighed her with deliberate care. "I am told," he began, voice steady and resonant, "that fate placed you in my mother's carriage last night." Rosamund's cheeks warmed as she murmured her apology, but he lifted a hand, stopping her. "No apology required. The evening's chaos made missteps inevitable." His tone was gentler than she expected, gentler than a man burdened by title and lineage might ever permit himself. The brief moment soothed something fragile inside her. Lady Agatha observed the exchange with the satisfaction of someone witnessing a long-awaited turn in a story. "Miss Hale will remain here until the newspapers lose their appetite for gossip," she announced. Rosamund startled. "The newspapers?" Alastair's brows knit. Lady Agatha passed him a folded sheet. Rosamund glimpsed her own name among the printed lines. A destitute young woman found climbing into the Wessex carriage, an ambitious ploy? Her stomach dropped. Alastair read quickly, irritation shadowing his expression. "Vultures," he muttered. "They would invent scandal even from spilled tea." He looked to Rosamund, his gaze softening. "You must not believe yourself the cause. Society delights in misrepresenting innocence." Lady Agatha tapped her cane. "To remedy this, we must craft our own narrative. Disgrace grows only when one allows silence to feed it." After breakfast, Lady Agatha requested Rosamund join her in the drawing room. When Rosamund entered, she found a small box waiting on the table. Lady Agatha gestured for her to open it. Inside lay an embroidered handkerchief of fine linen, edged with gold thread and bearing the Wessex crest. "A lady must never face society without proper tokens," Lady Agatha said calmly. "Take this. Let them see you are not without allies." Rosamund touched the delicate cloth, trembling with discomfort and gratitude. "My lady, this is far too generous." "Nonsense," Agatha interrupted. "Consider it a shield." Word of the gesture spread through London by evening. Servants whispered. Carriage drivers repeated the tale at taverns. Aristocratic circles buzzed with speculation. Why would Lady Wessex gift her crest to a ruined girl? Some praised the odd charity, others sharpened their tongues with suspicion. Rosamund felt the scrutiny as soon as she stepped outside the house for the afternoon promenade with Lady Agatha. Heads turned. Fans fluttered. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Rosamund tried to walk with dignity, though the weight of their attention stung as sharply as rain. That evening, the Wessex family attended a modest musical reception, meant to be a quiet return to society following the previous night's storm. Rosamund wore a pale lilac gown borrowed from Lady Agatha's niece, simple but graceful against the candlelit hall. She told herself she would keep to the shadows, speak only when spoken to, and return the handkerchief the moment propriety allowed. But fate seemed determined to test her resolve. During the intermission, Rosamund approached a corner where Lady Agatha sat conversing with acquaintances. She intended to slip the embroidered token back into the older woman's hand. Before she reached her, however, a sharp voice cut through the room. "Miss Hale," it called, dripping with false sweetness. Lady Henrietta Morland, known for her haughty beauty and sharper cruelty, stepped forward. "How fortunate you are to receive the Wessex crest. Tell us, did you earn it through charm or accident?" A hush fell. Rosamund tried to respond with grace. "Her ladyship was simply kind. I deserve no such honor." Henrietta smiled like a blade. "We heard you stumbled into their carriage." An unusual introduction. Rosamund's breath faltered. Murmurs rose. Then Alastair appeared beside her, his presence forming a protective barrier that silenced every whisper. "Miss Hale's presence requires no justification," he announced. "And my mother's token is bestowed upon those she deems worthy, not those who angle for attention." Henrietta's smile vanished. Rosamund stared at the floor, overwhelmed by the Duke's unexpected defense. Alastair offered Rosamund his arm, leading her away from the cluster of onlookers. "I hope you will forgive my directness," he murmured, "but I cannot abide cruelty masquerading as decorum." She nodded, too moved to speak. His nearness stirred something unfamiliar, security, perhaps, or the faintest spark of trust. As the evening ended, a footman discreetly handed Lady Agatha a sealed envelope. She read it with a tightening jaw before slipping it into her sleeve. Rosamund noticed the flicker of concern in the older woman's eyes. When they returned to Wessex House, Lady Agatha paused at the foot of the staircase. "There are those," she said quietly, "who fear losing influence. They will not welcome a woman they cannot easily categorize." She met Rosamund's gaze with deliberate calm. "But do not be troubled. I have dealt with vipers before." Rosamund retired to her chamber, troubled by the day's events yet strangely comforted. She pressed the embroidered handkerchief to her chest, uncertain whether it was a warning, a blessing, or the first thread of a destiny she dared not claim. Far below, in the quiet of his study, Alastair stood beside the window, watching the rain return in soft, steady lines. His thoughts drifted to the young woman who had unwittingly stepped into his life. There was something about her, a humility that did not mask strength, a gentleness that did not surrender. Meanwhile, in her chamber, Lady Agatha unfolded the letter she had hidden earlier. Its anonymous words cast a dark shadow. "The girl you have taken in is unsuitable. Her presence will tarnish the Wessex name. Remove her before ruin follows." Agatha read the lines twice, then held the paper to the candle flame. The wax curled and blackened as the letter burned. "Let them try," she whispered. And the flame devoured the last of the warning. A storm rolled in without warning, swallowing the late afternoon sky above Wessex House in a curtain of charcoal clouds. Rosamund stood at the tall window of the guest chamber, watching the first raindrops strike the glass like urgent fingers. She had been preparing to leave, her small trunk packed, her hat pinned neatly beside it. Yet the arrival of the tempest ended any hope of departure. Thunder cracked, shaking the very frame of the house. A footman soon knocked to announce that all carriages had been withdrawn from the courtyard for safety. Rosamund thanked him, though her heart sank. Another night beneath the Wessex roof meant deeper entanglement in matters she scarcely understood. When she descended into the corridor, she found Lady Agatha waiting with her cane, her expression unreadable beneath the flicker of wall sconce light. "The storm insists upon your stay," she said dryly. "I trust you will not take it as a personal conspiracy." Rosamund managed a faint smile. "Indeed not, my lady." Agatha nodded toward the far end of the corridor. "My son is in the library. The poor man must finish a report before dawn, and the weather has trapped him with his thoughts. Perhaps your company may spare him from their tyranny." The suggestion startled Rosamund, but Lady Agatha had already turned away. The library door was half open, warm lamplight spilling into the hallway. Rosamund paused before entering, smoothing her skirts and steadying her breath. Inside, the scent of leather-bound volumes mingled with the earthy aroma of rain. Duke Alastair stood near the tall windows, hands clasped behind his back, his figure outlined by flashes of lightning. He turned as she approached, offering a nod of acknowledgement that carried both invitation and restraint. "Miss Hale," he said quietly, "it appears nature conspires to keep you here another night." "Only until the storm clears," she replied, though even to her own ears the certainty wavered. He gestured toward the hearth where a gentle fire burned, shadows dancing across the ornate carpet. "Please sit. You must be chilled." Rosamund complied, though she felt anything but cold. The Duke retook his place opposite her, his posture composed yet unguarded in a way she had not seen before. The crackling flames cast soft gold along the sharp lines of his face, revealing a weariness that did not come from physical exertion but from burdens far older. He broke the silence first. "My mother can be rather determined in her endeavors." Rosamund folded her hands in her lap. "She has been generous, though I fear she expects far more from me than I am capable of offering." Alastair studied her, his gaze not intense but deeply attentive. "She expects only what she perceives in you, a strength you underestimate." Rosamund looked away, unsettled by the quiet sincerity of his words. Thunder rolled again, shaking loose a confession before she could guard it. "My family's ruin was not merely unfortunate," she said softly. "It was devastating. The debts, the stares, the pity, it all made returning to society almost unbearable." Her voice trembled, and she despised the weakness in it, yet the Duke did not look at her with contempt. He nodded slowly as though piecing together a truth he had suspected. "Suffering shifts the shape of one's world," he replied. "It makes familiar halls feel hostile, familiar faces unrecognizable." Rosamund lifted her gaze to his. "And you, Your Grace? Have you known such shifts?" Alastair turned slightly, eyes drifting toward a portrait of his late father mounted above the mantel. "I have known betrayal," he said, "and the weight of choosing one's path while others demand it be pre-written." Rosamund sensed the depth beneath the words, the shadow of an old wound still tender. She ventured gently, "Was it someone you loved?" He hesitated only a moment. "A woman who valued title more than truth. When she learned my affections did not guarantee the privileges she sought, she gladly surrendered both." Rosamund's heart tightened with an ache she could not explain. Not jealousy, something nearer to sorrow. "I am sorry," she murmured. "The loss of trust can hollow a person." Alastair inclined his head, the faintest hint of gratitude in his eyes. "It did. For a time. Until I learned to place my loyalty only where it is earned." She felt the weight of his gaze settle fully upon her again. "And in you, Miss Hale, I find sincerity without pretense. It is rare." The firelight flickered between them like a fragile bridge. Rosamund reached instinctively for a book on the small table beside her, hoping to steady her emotions. It was a well-worn volume of poetry. Alastair noticed her interest and reached for it at the same moment. Their fingers brushed, just lightly, yet enough to draw breath from her lungs. The brief contact felt like the spark of a lantern in a darkened room, small yet impossibly bright. She withdrew her hand at once, her cheeks warming. "Forgive me," she whispered. "There is nothing to forgive," he replied, his voice lower, gentler. The Duke leaned back slightly, observing her with an expression that held no claim, only curiosity, dangerous in its tenderness. "Miss Hale," he said after a pause, "I find peace in your presence. A peace I had forgotten was possible." Rosamund felt her pulse quicken, as if every word he spoke unraveled another thread binding her heart. The storm intensified outside, rain drumming against the window panes like urgent applause. A sudden flash of lightning illuminated Lady Agatha standing at the doorway, watching them with a quiet triumph she did not bother to hide. Rosamund rose at once, flustered, but the older woman lifted a hand. "Do not trouble yourselves," she said. "I only came to be certain the roof has not yet blown away." Her eyes softened as she looked between them. Alastair straightened but did not retreat into the stoic mask he often wore. Lady Agatha stepped closer, her cane tapping softly. "It warms me to see my son speak so freely," she murmured. Rosamund blushed, unsure how to respond. Alastair cleared his throat, though a rare warmth lingered in his expression. Lady Agatha turned to Rosamund with unexpected gentleness. "My dear, you have weathered hardship with grace. Never let this world persuade you that gentleness is weakness." Her words settled over Rosamund like a cloak lined with quiet strength. As another rumble of thunder passed overhead, Lady Agatha looked to her son with an approving nod, then withdrew, the door closing softly behind her. Rosamund stood in the glow of the fire, her heart fragile yet strangely steady. Alistair approached the window, watching the rain soften into a steady hush. "This storm," he said, "keeps you here longer than intended." Rosamund stepped closer, though she still kept a modest distance. "Perhaps," she whispered, "some storms arrive not to hinder us, but to guide us." Alistair turned toward her, and for a suspended moment, neither moved. Outside, the rain began to ease, but inside the library, something far more delicate had begun. An understanding neither had sought, yet both felt shifting the course of their lives. The storm would pass, but its mark had already been made. At dawn, the storm's remnants clung to the sky like bruised silk, and a tense hush settled over Wessex House. Rosamund descended the staircase with a mind burdened by half-formed emotions and a heart struggling to keep itself guarded. Yet before she reached the last step, she sensed a shift in the air. Servants whispering too quietly, Lady Agatha pacing near the vestibule, and the Duke standing still as a statue with a folded newspaper crushed in his hand. The moment he saw Rosamund, he straightened, the strain in his expression unmistakable. "Miss Hale," he said quietly, "we must speak." He handed her the newspaper with a reluctance that made her stomach clench. Rosamund unfolded it, and her breath fractured. The headline screamed scandal. A social climber at Wessex House? Intimate nights and impoverished schemes unveiled. Below it, the article detailed falsehood after vicious falsehood, painting her as a cunning opportunist who bewitched the Duke to restore her fallen family. Her cheeks flushed with humiliation, her eyes stinging. "I assure you," she whispered, barely audible, "I had no part in this. I never—" "Of course you did not," Alistair interrupted, voice edged with controlled fury. "This is the work of someone desperate to wound." Lady Agatha approached, cane tapping sharply. "We must act swiftly. The wolves of society feed on hesitation." Her eyes were flames of restrained rage, though Rosamund sensed she was not angry at her but for her. Still, Rosamund felt as though the world had collapsed beneath her feet. "I will leave immediately," she said. "My presence has brought shame upon your household. If I go now, perhaps the scandal will fade." "No," Alistair said at once. "You will not bear disgrace that is not yours." Rosamund shook her head, grief tightening her voice. "Your Grace, the article accuses me of staying here overnight, twice. They will not rest until they see me ruined. If I remain, the damage will widen." He stepped toward her, anger darkening his eyes. "Then let them choke on their lies." But Rosamund lowered her gaze, the pain in her expression striking him deeper than any insult could. Before he could speak again, Lady Agatha revealed a letter she had kept hidden. "This arrived moments ago." She handed it to Alistair, who read silently, his jaw clenching with each line. Rosamund saw the change in his posture, the rigid fury, the violent stillness. He read aloud only one sentence: "Remove the girl before you doom your lineage." Rosamund trembled. Alistair crushed the letter in his fist. "I know who authored this," he said darkly. "Lady Morland's envy was not content to bruise your dignity, she intends to shatter it." His voice rose with a rare, sharp passion. "I will confront her at once." Rosamund's hand fluttered to his sleeve, stopping him. "Please do not go. That is exactly what she wants, to provoke a scene and claim justification." The touch silenced him. The look they shared held a quiet ache, full of all the words neither had spoken. Lady Agatha watched with a knowing sigh, then addressed Rosamund. "My dear, you must understand. Society respects strength, not silence. Running will only validate their malice." "But staying would make me a spectacle," Rosamund whispered. Alistair stepped closer, his voice lower now, gentler but unyielding. "Miss Hale?" "Rosamund, do you imagine I could stand by while you are torn apart for a crime you did not commit?" Her breath caught at the sound of her name on his lips. Duty warred with longing within him, yet he did not retreat. Rosamund mustered courage from the fraying edges of her shame. "Your Grace, your reputation should not suffer for mine." "And why?" he replied. "Should your honor be any less protected than mine?" Before she could answer, a footman entered with frantic urgency. "Your Grace, Miss Hale's carriage is at the gate." Rosamund stiffened. She had not summoned it. The footman added, "The driver claims he was paid handsomely to ensure Miss Hale departs at once. He assumed you expected it." Lady Agatha exhaled a sharp, disbelieving breath. "Bold indeed. She intends to exile the girl before we can challenge her lies." Rosamund felt a sinking resignation. Then perhaps I should go, she murmured, if only to preserve what remains of peace within these walls. But Alistair stepped before her, blocking her path. No. I will not permit you to be driven away like some discarded inconvenience. His voice trembled, not with fear but fierce conviction. If you leave, let it be by your own choice. Not by threats. Not by fabricated shame. Rosamund's heart pounded, torn between gratitude and despair. You ask me to stay, yet you do not understand how deep society's cruelty can cut. Alistair lifted her chin with the barest touch of a finger, gaze unwavering. Then teach me, he whispered. Let me share the wound rather than watch you bear it alone. Before Rosamund could form a reply, distant bells chimed noon, echoing through the marble halls like an omen. The scandal was likely spreading already from drawing room to drawing room. Time was slipping away. Lady Agatha, unusually quiet, finally stepped forward. There is one way, she said softly, to silence every rumor at once. Alistair turned to her. Mother. You know what I mean, she pressed. Wessex honor is restored only through decisive action. Her eyes flicked toward Rosamund. And this young woman has proven herself more deserving than any of your so-called suitors. The unspoken meaning hit Rosamund like a blow. My lady, she whispered, breath shallow, surely you do not suggest. I suggest, Lady Agatha interrupted, that you consider your own worth. Not through wealth nor status but character. Rosamund stepped back, overwhelmed. This cannot be happening. But Alistair approached her again, each step measured, each breath shaped by a choice that could alter the rest of his life. Rosamund, he said softly, you believe yourself unworthy of my name. Yet I have never known a woman whose courage equaled yours. His voice deepened, roughened with truth he could no longer restrain. I do not want to defend you merely out of duty. I want to stand beside you because my heart refuses any other path. Her eyes shimmered in disbelief. Your Grace. Do not call me that, he whispered. Not now. Thunder no longer shook the earth. Instead, silence stretched between them with astonishing power. He took her hands cautiously as though afraid she might vanish. If choosing you invites ruin, he continued, then let the world believe me ruined. I have lived a life of expectation, of walls and titles. But with you, I feel free. Rosamund's breath broke. Tears welled, but she did not hide them. I am terrified, she admitted, voice trembling. I fear I will not survive the judgment that comes with your name. Then we face it together, Alistair said. And if society turns against us, let them. I no longer seek their approval. His words ignited a spark in her chest. Fear and hope entwined. She felt the trembling truth unfolding inside her. I love you, she said at last, her voice fragile but fearless. But I do not wish to harm your legacy. You are my legacy, he replied. If you will have me. The doors to the vestibule burst open then, revealing the carriage waiting like an executioner. Rain began to fall outside, soft but relentless. Alistair tightened his hold on Rosamund's hands. Choose me, he whispered. Rosamund closed her eyes, exhaling a breath laden with every hardship she had endured. When she opened them again, her decision had settled like a sunrise behind the storm. Yes, she whispered. Lady Agatha exhaled a sound that was almost a prayer. And just as the rain began to gather strength, the carriage outside was dismissed into the mist, empty. The rain thickened into a silver curtain as noon faded toward a muted, storm-washed afternoon. Rosamund stood in the entrance hall of Wessex House, her fingers still woven with Alistair's, her heart thundering with the weight of the decision she had just spoken aloud. Lady Agatha watched from a measured distance, her expression sharpened with approval and something softer, relief, perhaps, or gratitude to fate for finally bending to her will. Yet the world outside that grand doorway had not changed. It was still armed with whispers and waiting teeth. Rosamund knew the moment she stepped beyond the threshold, her courage would be tested. Alistair gently released her hands, only to settle one respectfully at the small of her back. There will be consequences, he said, voice low but unwavering. And they will reach us before nightfall. Rosamund inhaled a trembling breath. Then we must meet them before they shape themselves into greater monsters. He nodded. She was right. Retreat now would only invite further lies. Lady Agatha approached, cane tapping the marble like the quiet toll of a warning bell. The Moreland girl will not surrender her slander easily, she said. Her pride will roar when she learns her plot has failed. Rosamund swallowed, but the fire that had been lit inside her refused to dim. Let her roar, she answered, surprising even herself. I am done being a shadow to someone else's cruelty. Alistair's eyes warmed at her courage. Then we confront her, he said. Publicly. Where her mask cannot shield her. Lady Agatha gave a decisive nod. The Aberford luncheon begins within the hour. The entire London circle will be present, including Henrietta Morland. There, your voices will carry farther than any printed lie. The decision fell into place like the final piece of a locked mechanism. Rosamund felt a tremor of fear, but beneath it lay a steady glow of resolve. She accepted the cloak Lady Agatha offered, fastening it around her shoulders. Then she turned to Alistair. If we do this, she whispered, we cannot falter. He brushed a thumb along the back of her hand, light, steady, grounding. I do not intend to. The carriage ride through the rain-slick streets was somber yet electric with tension. Rosamund watched the blurred city pass by, her breath fogging the window as she envisioned the confrontation ahead. Alistair sat beside her, composed but simmering with controlled fury. I should have shielded you sooner, he said suddenly. None of this, she cut him off gently. You owe me no apology. I walked into the storm the moment I stepped into your carriage. Now I choose to walk through it. He closed his eyes briefly, humbled by her strength. Lady Agatha observed them both with a keen, assessing gaze, as if memorizing the quiet alliance growing between them. When the carriage rolled into the Aberford estate, servants rushed forward with umbrellas. The garden terrace was bright with lanterns, polished silver, and the hum of brittle laughter. Yet as Rosamund stepped out, conversation stilled. Fans hesitated mid-flutter. A few heads turned sharply toward a cluster of figures near the fountain, Lady Morland among them, whispering with practiced disdain. Henrietta's lips curved into a triumphant smile when she saw Rosamund, as though she had already claimed her victory. But that confidence flickered when Alistair stepped down after her, offering his arm not with pity but unmistakable declaration. Rosamund placed her hand upon his, steadying herself as they crossed the terrace. Each step ignited sharper stares and quiet gasps. Henrietta approached first, eyes gleaming with a predator's satisfaction. Miss Hale, she said sweetly, I am astonished you would brave such company after this morning's revelations. Her companions tittered with rehearsed cruelty. Rosamund felt her pulse quicken, but Alistair's presence beside her held her together. Lady Morland, he answered coolly, we have come precisely because of those revelations. Henrietta's smile tightened. I merely voiced concerns shared by many. One must protect the integrity of families such as yours, your grace. Integrity? Alistair repeated, voice darkening. You speak of integrity while orchestrating lies and manipulating the press to destroy a woman whose only offense was stepping into the wrong carriage during a storm? Her face blanched. I beg your pardon? Rosamund stepped forward then, drawing every eye. Her voice trembled slightly, yet rang with truth. I may be insignificant in society's measure, Lady Morland, but I have never deceived or schemed. I have only endured. Her eyes met Henrietta's with unexpected strength. Can you say the same? Whispers rippled across the terrace like a sudden chill. Alistair's voice rose, clear and resonant. Let it be known, Rosamund Hale has my respect, my trust, and my allegiance. Any who dare slander her will answer to me. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. And to the truth. Henrietta faltered visibly, glancing around for support that no longer stood behind her. Her companions withdrew like shadows at dawn. Without further excuse, she turned sharply and fled into the house, her defeat echoing in the sudden hush of the gathering. Rosamund exhaled shakily, her knees weakening. Alistair caught her gently. It is over, he murmured. The venom has lost its sting. But Lady Agatha stepped beside them, voice firm. Not entirely. We must seal this moment so it cannot be undone. And before Rosamund could question her meaning, Alistair knelt. Gasps exploded through the terrace. Rain glimmered like falling jewels in his hair as he looked up at her, eyes unmasked and full of fierce conviction. Rosamund Hale, he said, voice raw with emotion. If you will give me leave, I ask not as a duke nor as a man cornered by scandal, but as one whose heart has chosen yours, will you become my wife? Time stopped. The rain softened to a gentle hush. Every gaze held its breath. Tears welled in Rosamund's eyes. Not from fear but release. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will. Alistair rose and drew her into an embrace that broke the last barrier between them. The terrace erupted in murmurs of astonishment, reverence, and reluctant admiration. Lady Agatha lifted her chin, victorious in quiet dignity. Within a fortnight, the wedding took place, not in a cathedral dripping with spectacle, but in a small ancient chapel on the Wessex estate. Candles flickered along the stone walls, and soft organ notes drifted like whispers of blessing. Rosamund walked the narrow aisle with steadiness born of hard-won courage. Alistair awaited her at the altar, eyes softening as she approached, as though she were the first sunrise he had ever witnessed. Their vows were simple, sincere. When the ceremony concluded, Lady Agatha touched Rosamund's cheek gently. "You have restored more than my son's heart," she murmured. "You have restored hope." Months passed. Rosamund settled into her role with humility and quiet grace. She introduced charitable programs, visited tenant families personally, and breathed life into rooms long dulled by silence. Alistair stood at her side always, not as her guardian but her partner. Their love grew not from grand gestures alone, but from evenings spent in shared laughter, from long walks through dew-lit gardens, from whispered confessions by firelight. Yet even as tranquility settled around them, Rosamund never forgot the moment that had changed everything. The storm, the scandal, the courage required to stand when all wished to see her fall. In the end, it was not the grandeur of the Wessex name that defined her life, but the quiet power she carried within her, proof that destiny often begins with a single rain-soaked mistake. And love, when chosen boldly, reshapes the world.